Sounds like Stewart-Haas Racing might be leaving Ford at the end of this season, and Kurt Busch might be teasing a potential return to NASCAR. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're about to start to talk about the North Wilkesboro Truck Race, as they have a title sponsor for the event. It is going to be called the Wright Brand 250. Last year, the race called the Tyson 250. Wright Brand is part of the Tyson brand companies, so it's pretty interesting to see that Wright Brand is going to be sponsoring the NASCAR Truck Series race at North Wilkesboro, which once again will be a 250 lap or 250 event race at North Wilkesboro. Some pretty good sponsorship for the event. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Giancarlo Esposito. As it was announced on Friday that Giancarlo Esposito will be given the command for the Cup Series race at Circuit of the Americas. For those who don't know who he was Gus on Breaking Bad and also was the main villain of Far Cry 6. He was a really good actor, one of the best actors I've seen ever do acting. It's really cool to see that he's going to give a command. I think he's going to do an epic and a really, really great job. Nonetheless, glad to see that Giancarlo Esposito will be given the command for the NASCAR Cup Series race at COTA. I think he's really going to do a solid and a pretty good job, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Prime. Now, earlier this evening, Kyle Larson picked up his first win of 2024 at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. And Prime congratulated Kyle Larson on getting the win. Obviously, it was announced about 2 weeks ago during Daytona Week that Kyle Larson had been the first NASCAR driver to sign as an entitlement driver with Prime. So it's really amazing and cool to see that Prime, which is one of the biggest energy drink companies out there and also one of the biggest sports drink companies that is run by Logan Paul and KSI out there, promoting Kyle Larson. And to see that basically Kyle Larson's able to win was pretty cool and phenomenal. A massive and a huge win for Kyle Larson. I think, again, just seeing Prime, the logo, how big the company's grown. I mean, about a month ago, they outsold, I think, a couple big companies like Powerade and Gatorade at Walmart. So it's really huge to see Kyle Larson pick up this win. And I think it's phenomenal, incredible to see that Prime continues to grow their branding and they're working with Kyle Larson. Pretty awesome and cool stuff, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Apple. As it was reported by Adam Stern on Friday evening that NASCAR has revealed that it's developing a VR experience that would allow fans at home to use Meta or Apple Vision Pro to join an actual Cup race as if there is a 41st car. This is actually a really cool thing, and I never thought would potentially be possible. Obviously, virtual reality and Meta have grown in a massive and a huge way over the last decade or so, and now the fact that they are developing this little product that Apple and Meta and all these companies are working together to make this, I think is phenomenal and absolutely incredible. It's unclear when this product will be available. My best guess might be late 2024 or early 2025, but to see NASCAR is trying new things, I think is also pretty phenomenal as well. So nonetheless, I think it's cool to see that Apple and Meta are working towards this, a VR experience. Hopefully, it can be very, very successful, especially for success of this sport going into the future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Bahrain Grand Prix. So on Saturday, while you had the NASCAR Xfinity Series, Cup Series, and Truck Series events going on, you also had the Bahrain Grand Prix, which opened up the Formula One season. And to be honest, really not much happened in this event outside of Logan Sargent basically locking up the tires and nearly stalling. There really wasn't much that happened outside of Lance Stroll also spinning as well. But Max Verstappen put up a dominating clinic and won the race by 22 seconds over his teammate. That is 10 seconds more than even what Max Verstappen, I believe, did last year in the first race, which he won by 12 seconds. It's just not a good start to the year for fans. A very boring race, in my opinion. Just nothing happened. I got a feeling that this is going to be something that's going to be common for Formula One this year in 2024. I think a lot of fans are hoping with the new regulations that are coming in 2026 that it can make the racing product a lot better. But so far, to start off the season, not a good start. And they've got another race, I think, in Qatar somewhere, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's actually in Saudi Arabia as the next race for Formula One. Hopefully that race can be better this Saturday, but honestly, I'm not confident that we're going to see a really good race at Saudi Arabia at the Jeddah circuit. I think it's going to be kind of a boring event, and I think it's going to be a struggle, but nonetheless, congratulations on Max Verstappen picking up the event and picking up the win. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about IndyCar. Now, a couple days ago I talked about this on the channel, but there's a lot of chatter that IndyCar is in talks to have a charter system in IndyCar potentially by the Indianapolis 500. Now, according to the article that Autosport.com had reported, it sounds like I said, they're trying to have a charter system created. Now, originally I had said that they may go ahead and not have charters for the Indy 500. However, it sounds like that the teams may be protesting against that, and they would probably want charters included in the Indianapolis 500. Look, I understand that the teams want a lot more money and they want to basically be able to be on the grid for every single event. But if there are guaranteed spots for the Indianapolis 500, it is going to kill the Indy 500 hype in a big way. Now, there still is going to surely be a lot of hype for the Indianapolis 500, but I feel like that IndyCar is continuing to make a lot of bad decisions and they continue to shoot themselves in the foot with the decisions that they continue to make. I'm not a fan of this move, in my opinion, and like I said, if they do go ahead and decide to have guaranteed spots for the Indy 500, I don't think they should call it the Indy 500 anymore because it should be the fastest 33 cars. That's what makes Indy 500 special compared to other big events. I think it would be a bad decision overall if they were to do this. I'm worried they're going to go ahead and do it, and I do have a bad feeling they're going to make the decision where they're going to go ahead and have guaranteed spots for the Indy 500, even for this year's event, and honestly, I think it would kill any hype that the Indy 500 has, especially going this year with Kyle Larson entering. I'm not a big fan of them having guaranteed spots potentially for the Indianapolis 500. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Pato O'Ward. As it was confirmed on Friday morning that Pato O'Ward has signed a multi-year contract extension with Aaron McLaren. This multi-year contract is going to go through, according to reports, 2027. Pato O'Ward has been with Aaron McLaren since 2020, and he was expected to sign a multi-year extension. We talked about it a couple days ago. There was apparently documents and articles suggesting from, I think, some of the court documents from the Alex Palou lawsuit that's been going on. It was expected that we were going to see Pato O'Ward sign a multi-year deal. This is a really good move. Pato O'Ward has been a really good driver at Aaron McLaren over the course of the last couple of years, and he's looking going this year to be a championship threat and championship contender. And I think Pato O'Ward does have a really great chance and a really great opportunity to win this year's championship. He's been a very phenomenal driver in the sport over the course of the last couple of years in IndyCar, and I think he'll have a very good chance and an amazing and great opportunity to potentially get his first ever IndyCar Series championship. We'll see what Pato O'Ward can do this year. He deserves his contract extension, and I do expect a pretty big and massive year coming for Pato O'Ward in the 2024 IndyCar season as he looks to get his first win in a couple seasons. Now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Rajah Caruth. Now, it was reported by Chris Knight from CatchFence.com that during a press conference for the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race on Friday, Rajah Caruth told the media that he has no Xfinity Series races planned as of now for 2024, as he'll focus his full and entire energy on the Truck Series season. But he does say that he would entertain any offers if they do become available. Rajah Caruth, of course, focusing on trying to win a Truck Series championship this year. On Friday night, was able to pick up his first Truck Series win of his career. We're going to talk about that here in just a little bit. But Rajah Caruth made a couple select Xfinity Series starts at Alf Prime Racing, quite a few starts as a matter of fact, and also got a really good opportunity with Hendrick Motorsports and the number 17 team last year. Especially with him picking up his first ever Truck Series win, I would imagine because he's got massive and huge connections to Hendrick Motorsports. Remember, it was announced earlier this week that HendrickCars.com is going to sponsor Rajah Caruth for every single race this year. I expect that Rajah Caruth would potentially, especially if there's any opportunities to come up, I think he is going to make at least a couple Xfinity Series starts near the end of the year, where I know the Hendrick Motorsports is going to be running their 17 car for around 10 or 11 races during the middle portion, beginning portion of the year. Kyle Larson, Boris Said, Chase Elliott, Alex Bowman, and William Byron all are going to get behind and wheel that car. I imagine, especially with the massive connections that Rajah Caruth has, I think he will at least at some point this year make some Xfinity Series starts. Because I think he deserves to make some starts this year, and hopefully he'll get to make some Xfinity Series starts at some point in 2024, especially with how good he's been. I think by 2025, he might be full-time Xfinity with a team like Junior Motorsports. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Riley Herbst. As it was reported by Chris Snyder from the Catch Fence once again, that Riley Herbst told the media on Friday that he will run at least 3 more Cup Series races in 2024. And according to him, he says before the playoffs. I think I saw a quote tweet as well, someone saying he doesn't just want to run Super Speedway Racing Cup, he would like to maybe run some short tracks and some intermediate races as well. Riley Herbst has made some select starts in the Cup Series over the course of the last couple years, including in the Daytona 500, of course, I believe it was for Rico Racing in the number 15 team, and that's probably the team he's likely going to run for in his select Cup Series races that he runs the rest of the year. Riley has been pretty solid to start off in the Xfinity Series this year, and he's been getting better and better as a race car driver, and also Riley Herbst did a pretty solid job, all things considered, in the select Cup Series races he's ran. I know Daytona did not go very well for him. I think he crashed out of the event, but I think Riley Herbst wants to learn a lot more and grow as a driver. And I think he's taking that Cup Series experience and using that to a pretty big advantage, and I think that is going to help him in a pretty big way in the Xfinity. I know the Xfinity Series and the Cup Series car are completely different now. It's not like when the Gen 6 car was around. These cars are completely different. But I think that Riley Herbst needs to make some more Cup Series starts. I know he would eventually like to go full-time Cup Series racing in the future, but as of right now, he's only got 3 more starts planned. We'll see what the rest of his schedule is for the 2024 season and what races he'll run in 2024. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Stewart-Haas Racing. It was reported by Bob Pockrass on Friday afternoon that Stewart-Haas Racing will not be appealing the penalties they received earlier in the week. Remember, it was announced back on Wednesday or Tuesday evening that Noah Gragson and Ryan Preece and the 10 and 41 teams received 35-point driver point and owner's points penalties for the roof rail deflectors being messed with. Now, on Saturday, NASCAR showed what exactly they messed with. It seemed like they may have had a little bit of a thicker inch on the cubic inch of the roof rail deflectors, which, of course, you're not supposed to mess with according to the rule book. The one thing that does help this team a little bit is basically it was 35 points. It was only an L1 penalty because it was a part that was made by the teams. It's not a single source vendor. If it had been a single source vendor part, I would imagine they try to appeal it. The best they would have gotten anyways is probably 20 points, which wouldn't have been the end of the world. And hey, Noah Gragson probably would have been in a better position considering he had a very solid run at Las Vegas. But NASCAR has been cracking down, and one thing I do love about NASCAR, especially as of late and recently, is they have been a lot more transparent, basically showing the parts that they've been messing with. They used to not show a lot of these parts, especially at the beginning of the next gen era, but they've been changing it over the last couple of years, and honestly, I really love the direction the sport is going. You want to be transparent with the fan base and let the fan base know exactly what is going on, especially when it comes to your racing product. So I think it's a good decision for Stewart-Haas Racing not to appeal. I'm not shocked that they're not appealing it, because in my personal opinion, I think it was the right decision not to appeal it because you weren't going to get many of your points back anyways. Overall, a good decision from SHR, and now SHR tries to focus on getting their program a lot better, especially with a lot of rumors that are going on with Stewart-Haas Racing at this current moment. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Joey Logano. Now, Joey Logano basically spoke to the media about the glove penalty he received, and NASCAR even showed the glove that Joey Logano had. Joey Logano also received a penalty earlier this week, received a $10,000 fine for having webbing in his glove during qualifying at Atlanta Motor Speedway. And it's been reported as of recently as well that this webbing that he had in his glove might have already been there from Daytona 500 qualifying. Shout out to Brayden Laster, the pizza man, for putting that out on Twitter. Now, Joey Logano then also spoke to the media about the webbing of the glove, and he said it was completely embarrassing and kind of joked saying that he doesn't know how to sew gloves. Then he had a lot of drivers that were asked. Among them were Bubba Wallace who were asked about it. Denny Hamlin was asked. Kyle Larson, who won the race earlier tonight, was asked about it. And also, I believe I saw Corey LaJoie talk about the webbing of the glove as well. Obviously, the reason Joey Logano did not get a points penalty for this is basically he was going to serve a pass-through penalty. I know people were saying, well, he kind of got lucky because of the caution coming out. But hey, he got very, very lucky in that situation. And Joey Logano admits that it was his fault. He's the one who had the glove, which is why the team also didn't receive an owner point penalty and no one else was affected. Joey Logano took responsibility for, which is great on Logano to do that, because Joey Logano historically at times has not been the best when it comes to taking responsibility responsibility in situations and incidents. But it's interesting to hear that Joey Logano was embarrassed. Obviously, a lot of people don't think that webbing of a glove really plays a role and a factor on everything. But again, at least Logano knows how to take responsibility in this situation and in this incident. I'm not shocked to see him take responsibility because obviously it is a pretty big situation right there to get a pretty big fine. But I think Joey Logano will be able to recover from this and move on. He had a good run at Vegas earlier this week, so we'll see if Joey Logano can recover and bounce back and get back in the championship hunt going into the future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. Now, Shane Van Gisbergen made his first official true mile-and-a-half intermediate start in the Xfinity Series at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. He was hoping to get a lot of experience and wanted to get a lot better on the racetrack. Unfortunately, I believe at the middle portion or near the end of stage number 1, Shane Van Gisbergen had engine troubles and engine issues. And he spoke to the media after they actually tried to get SVG back out on the racetrack to get a lot more experience and learn how to race on these types of tracks. Unfortunately, the car overheated so much that it blew up. It is a really big shame as while SVG didn't have the overall pace and speed on the racetrack, he was starting to progress and get a little better at the start of the event. Sometimes you're going to have things and situations come up where you're going to have these problems come into play. The good thing for SVG is he's absorbing the information he has because he actually, according to reports, he was actually spotted inside the Daniel Suarez's pit box trying to absorb the information and learn how to get better on these intermediate racetracks. This year is going to be a massive learning curve for SVG. He is going to be expected to do better as the year progresses. He didn't get a lot of practice time, which is something that really wasn't his fault. They had major issues getting through the inspection line, and obviously an overheating thing, that's not his fault, and it's really kind of killed the momentum he had because he finished in third position at Atlanta and also had a pretty solid run at Daytona. But I think Phoenix is going to be very interesting. A lot of people compare Phoenix kind of like to a road course. We'll see if SVG can perform really good at Phoenix Raceway. It's a shame he couldn't close out the deal and couldn't finish the race. Hopefully, though, he can run really good in the next few races and have a solid run at Phoenix Raceway because he's going to need it because I believe now he's almost outside of the playoffs due to that run, unfortunately. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Hailie Deegan. Now, I did a video covering this situation last night on my channel. If you haven't seen it, go ahead and check it out. But Hailie Deegan had a very, very solid run at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, and she was able to finish in 15th place, getting her second career top 15 finish in the NASCAR Xfinity Series and getting her first finish, not on the lead lap, unfortunately, but getting her first top 20 finish of 2024. This is a really solid run for Hailie Deegan, all things considered. She beat drivers like Jesse Love and Sheldon Creed. It almost beat Josh Williams. And I looked at some of the times after the race. She was even quicker than Eric Almirola, a proven winner. Look, did Hailie Deegan get like a top 10? No, absolutely not. But to finish 15th and only her fourth start is pretty good. The hope for her going into the future, because after the race it was reported by Noah Lewis that she was actually really excited about getting that finish. My hope for her is that she can continue building on this and running really, really well. I want to start seeing her consistently be inside the top 15 and eventually start getting top 10s and maybe eventually the top 5s. AIM Racing, we all know, is not the fastest and quickest organization in the world. So if she can start being a lot more consistent and running up front, I think that she will be very, very competitive. And the average finish last year saw Brett Moffitt, I think, was 19th place, so he did have some mechanical electrical issues. Because you look at the last couple weeks for her, she didn't have a really good run at Daytona, and she had fuel issues at Atlanta. Hopefully she can run good this upcoming week at Phoenix. She hasn't been historically great in the Truck Series. Hopefully, though, she can continue the really strong start and a momentum she had this past week at Vegas and maybe get inside the top 10 and run good. Still happy for her. Congratulations to her on getting her first top 15 of 2024, and we'll see if she can build on, maybe even lead some laps throughout the year. Hopefully she can run really, really good with her team this weekend at Phoenix Raceway as she looks to build and continue to grow her career. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about John Hunter Nemechek. As it was confirmed by Chris Knight from the Catch Fence that John Hunter Nemechek will be driving the 20 car for Joe Gibbs Racing at Phoenix this upcoming weekend and Circuit of the Americas. John Nemechek is going to make 10 starts throughout the 2024 NASCAR Xfinity Series season, and he came off on only his third start of the year, picking up his first win in the Xfinity Series this year in the number 20 car after pulling out a pretty solid and big lead near the end of the event and holding off, I think it was Riley Herbst, or I think Chandler Smith was in contention to get that as well, though he won by nearly 5 seconds over Cole Custer. John Nemechek, I would have to imagine, is one of the favorites going to these next few events. He's obviously running the Xfinity Series. I know that the Cup Series car is completely different than the Xfinity Series car, but he's running the Xfinity Series to get a lot of more track time. And also, he doesn't have the restrictions because remember, he's only been in the Cup Series one season prior, which is one of the biggest reasons why he gets to run as many races as he wants to in possible. It's good to see him getting the track experience. I think it will help with his Cup Series runs. He's got 5 other races planned after Circuit Americas. I think Michigan's one of those races. I don't think Bristol's on the schedule for him later in the season, but we'll see if John Nemechek can be solid and really, really competitive in the next couple weeks. I think he's going to be fast. We know how strong the Joe Gibbs racing cars historically have been at Phoenix. I think John Nemechek will be a major front runner and contender to get it done at Phoenix Raceway, but I'm excited to see he'll be back behind the wheel of the number 20 car at this upcoming race at Phoenix Raceway. We'll see what he can be able to accomplish and get done at Phoenix Raceway. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Aric Almirola. Now, after NASCAR Xfinity Series race concluded, Aric Almirola put out a reflecting tweet on his return to the NASCAR Xfinity Series and confirmed at the bottom of the tweet that he'll be back in the number 19 car for Joe Gibbs Racing at Phoenix Raceway. Remember, Aric Almirola is going to run 15 NASCAR Xfinity Series starts in 2024 for Joe Gibbs Racing. I think he finished in 12th or 13th in his first start and is looking to get really, really good in the Xfinity Series once again. Obviously, he's been in Cup for so many years, so he has to learn a lot of new things with the Xfinity Series car. Now, obviously, Phoenix is historically, talking about this with John Nemechek a second ago, but historically, Phoenix is a really solid and a really good racetrack for Joe Gibbs Racing. But Aric Almirola historically has not been amazing and not great at this racetrack. Though he did, I think, get a top 5 finish actually in 2018, so that's not entirely true. Now, what are my expectations of Aric Almirola at Phoenix and through the rest of the year? I think that Aric Almirola is eventually going to figure this Xfinity Series car out, and I think he is going to win a couple races. I think he's going to be running at Richmond, if I'm not mistaken, which historically is a really good track for him in the Cup Series. And there's some other really good tracks that are on his schedule that I think he is going to be very, very strong and really capable at. I'm just excited to see Aric Almirola back in Xfinity. I think he did an all-right job at points, was inside the top 10. The hope is for him is that he can run really, really good and have a solid run with Joe Gibbs Racing. We'll see what he can do this upcoming weekend at Phoenix. I'm excited to see him back on the wheel. Let's see if he can have a really strong run with the number 19 car this upcoming weekend at Phoenix Raceway in the 19 car. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Rajah Caruth. Now, history was made on Friday evening because Rajah Caruth picked up his first career NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series victory. He becomes only the 3rd African-American driver to win a NASCAR Top 3 Tier Series event. The only other 2 drivers are Wendell Scott, who won, I think, the 1963 and 1964 Jacksonville event, and Bubba Wallace, who's won many NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series races and also won 2 NASCAR Cup Series races up to this point with 2311 Racing and looking for more going down the road. This was a very major and huge win. You had a ton of really major drivers in motorsports congratulating Rajah Caruth. Among those I saw Bubba Wallace, who has been a massive mentor to Rajah Caruth. Kyle Larson, who, of course, has support from HendrickCars.com. Kyle Larson also won the Cup Series race later in the weekend. Kyle Larson congratulating him as well. Carson Hocevar, who, of course, is technically a teammate with Rajah Caruth this year, he congratulated him. I saw William Byron congratulate him. Even Scott Speed, who hasn't tweeted in 4 years. I saw Justin Marks. I saw many drivers and people in this industry, including Tommy Joe Martins, who Rajah has driven for in the past, congratulating Rajah Caruth. This was an absolute huge win, and I've seen what this dude has done over the last 4 or 5 years, and the transformation that I've seen from him from a year ago is absolutely phenomenal. It's not just a win that he has put in, but to start this season, he finished 3rd at Daytona, he finished 8th last week at Atlanta, and finished in 1st and got the victory. And yes, people had speeding penalties, but guess what? Rajah Caruth led 38 laps, and held them off at the end of the race, held off a hard-charging Tyler Ankrum. And in general, to see that the support that Rajah Caruth has been getting is really awesome to watch. And you think about the long-term futures, I don't think this is going to be the only time we're going to be talking about Rajah Caruth winning. I think he's going to win quite a few races this year. He is very motivated. He's one of the hardest working drivers in the industry currently at the moment. I think Rajah Caruth is going to win quite a few races this season. I expect him to win 2 or 3, and then eventually, if he does good enough this year, I think he moves up to Junior Motorsports, and eventually in the next couple of years, I think he's going to be Hendrick Motorsports NASCAR Cup Series program. Rajah is young enough. He's only 21. I think eventually he will be in a Hendrick Motorsports Cup Series car because we know that he's got massive connections with Rick Hendrick. In general, this is a massive win for him. The support I've seen from him and a majority of people outside of certain individuals I'm not going to talk about here congratulate him on a pretty massive and huge win, which I think is a huge accomplishment for him. I'm just so stoked for him. He's worked so hard to get here. It's a real true sim to racing reality. To see what he's done is amazing, phenomenal, and nonetheless, congratulations to Rajah Caruth on picking up his first career truck win, the first of many to come. I was so excited to see him get it done. I think he's going to win a lot more races in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to jump on to the first of 3 major stories in today's episode as we're talking about 23XI Racing. Now, last week, it was reported by Daniel Trotter, who works at SiriusXM NASCAR Radio. She had Steve Lauletta, who is the president of 23XI Racing, on the show with Jeff Gluck as well. And Steve Lauletta does say that they are planning to run a 3rd car at some point in the 2024 season. But the details are coming relatively soon. Last year, 23XI Racing did run a 3rd car for only 2 races. They ran a number 67 car, that of course being for Travis Strana in the Daytona 500, where Travis Strana, I believe, finished in 11th or 12th position. And unfortunately crashed out on the last lap. That kind of cost Kyle Larson a shot at getting a good finish, and Eric Almirola was collected in that as well. And also they ran the car at the Indianapolis Road Course with Kamui Kobayashi. Obviously, they've been wanting to run this car all year long for potential drivers to get behind the wheel. You look at international drivers who want this. And I think eventually they are wanting to run this car. And the reason they're bringing a 67 car, in my opinion, is they're wanting to eventually have this car as a full-time entry. Now, who could be some candidates that could get behind the wheel? Let's begin with Kamui Kobayashi. Kamui Kobayashi is a part of the World Endurance Championship, and I think during the month where I think they could make the start, Kamui Kobayashi would be available. He's driven for this team before. I think he'd be a very early and easy candidate to look at as a potential possibility. You've also got Brendan Hartley, who's part of Toyota's World Endurance Championship team. I think Brendan Hartley, who's been really good in the World Endurance Championship, I think he's won some Mod 24-hour races in the past. I think he'd be a really solid candidate to go with. You've also got drivers in the lower series, and of course, working at TRD's development pipeline. You've got Corey Heim, who is signed as, basically been announced as a reserve driver for 23XI Racing this year. He would be a really solid and good candidate to get. And plus, he's been solid in Xfinity, and also he's been pretty good in trucks, so he'd be a really good driver to look at. Plus, he's a reserve driver, and I think they're looking at him as a potential 3rd full-time driver not too far down the road. You've also got Chandler Smith. Chandler Smith is also, I think, a reserve driver for the Toyota pipeline. Chandler Smith, I think, wants to go full-time Cup racing in the not-so-distant future, and I think he'd be a really good candidate to go for. Plus, he's had some Cup starts in the next-gen car. You've also got Sheldon Creed, who's made a few select Xfinity Series starts with JGR up to this point. Of course, ran full-time with RCR the last couple of years, and as a next-gen start, he'd be a solid candidate. And then you've also got Eric Almirola. Eric Almirola, obviously, we talked about him a second ago, he's been running part-time with them. We all thought it was a chance to be the reserve driver for Denny Hamlin. If Denny Hamlin had to miss races, I imagine he'd be a candidate. And then there's some outside possibilities like Carl Edwards, perhaps, even Kurt Busch, we'll talk about here a little bit. If Carl Edwards ever was to return to sport, don't think that really could happen. There's also like Juan Pablo Montoya, there's other drivers that they could absolutely go with. But I'm excited to see that 23XI Racing is going to bring this 3rd car back. If you want my prediction where this car is going to return, I think it's going to be COTA. Circuit Americas is the first road course on the schedule, which is only 2 weeks after this week at Phoenix. I think there's a really good chance that that is where 23XI Racing is going to bring out that number 67 car, because I think that's the number that they are going to end up using in the event. I'm excited to see, nonetheless, that this car is going to make a return. Hopefully, will be very, very successful. It's a car that's shown a lot of speed in the past. We know 23XI Racing is looking to expand to 3 full-time cars. They do want to have a 3rd full-time car, and depending how this car ends up doing in the select races it runs, I would imagine not too far down the road, we are going to see 23XI Racing go ahead and use this this car eventually full time. Again, charter price have to go down. We know they want to expand. They know want to get some charters. We'll see what ends up happening not too far down the road. Nonetheless, so glad to see a 2311 Racing is going to be running the number 67 car at least for a few select races in 2024. Imagine all the road courses, maybe for some other drivers that could get an opportunity in shot here. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next major story of today's episode as we're talking about Kurt Busch. Now, if you were scouring social media on Friday evening, you may have seen a tweet from Kurt Busch. And this could be Kurt Busch maybe potentially teasing a return to NASCAR. He tweeted out saying, basically, I heard that it was my day. He said, refired, not rehired. This is very interesting. Kurt Busch has obviously been wanting to get back into racing. We know that he technically announced retirement last year during the Daytona weekend, but we also know that Kurt Busch still has to be medically cleared by officials. I talked about it just a few minutes ago, but 2311 Racing is planning to run their third car. This could be the driver that they are teasing to potentially make a return. Now, Kurt Busch, obviously, like I mentioned, still has to be medically cleared to get back behind the wheel of a race car. And it's a shame that he had to retire from full-time racing and racing altogether. Though, like I've already mentioned, he wants to make a comeback and make a return to the sport. Kurt Busch is arguably one of the most underrated NASCAR drivers of all time. And any organization that Kurt Busch has driven for, he has brought that organization up. He's been a big reason why 2311 Racing has gotten good as it has. He's helped Bubba Wallace out in a massive and a huge way, and he's helped out Tyler Reddick grow as a driver as well. He's also been a commentator in the sport, which we'll get to that speculation here in a minute as well. But man, I would absolutely be stoked if Kurt Busch was a driver that 2311 Racing was talking about on potentially making a return. Because I would love to see Kurt Busch close out his career. Obviously, he's not been in the sport for a few years now. The last time he technically raced was when he was going to qualify for Pocono and then had that really bad wreck. NASCAR, of course, has been working on the safety and working on the precautions to make the cars a lot better and a lot more safer, which I think they've done a really good job on at least fixing some of the safety issues, though there still are some issues when it comes to safety. I think Kurt Busch deserves at least one last hurrah and deserves to make a return to the sport. Now, where could Kurt Busch make a return? Like I've already mentioned with 2311 Racing, I think that they are teasing to potentially make a return at Circuit of the Americas. I think that's where they're looking at as a potential possibility to go to and looking to race. Now, how likely are the chances of him making a return? I think especially now with the fact that Kurt Busch is kind of teasing this, I think they are very high, and I think it will happen some far down the road. But if it's not a return to the driver's seat, where could this be a return? Maybe this is Kurt Busch talking about maybe taking an ownership stake in 2311 Racing. Kurt Busch is a media consultant and working as a major high-up consultant with 2311 Racing. I would love to see Kurt Busch take an ownership role. Maybe he's looking at ownership. The other thing is broadcasting. We already know, and it's no secret, that we know that Dale Jr. is not returning to NBC because he's going to be going to Amazon. I wonder if NBC is trying to, or Fox, is trying to play a role in picking up Kurt Busch, or maybe they're looking at Amazon and TNT is maybe looking at Kurt Busch and they're thinking, hey, Kurt Busch is a potential possibility to be picking up. Because Kurt Busch, in my opinion, is a really good commentator. He did a really good job last year commentating COTA, and he did a really awesome and great job commentating Kansas as well, a racetrack that he won at in that number 45 car a couple seasons ago in 2022 against Kyle Larson. I really miss Kurt Busch being in the sport, man. I think he deserves at least a one last hurrah, and maybe, like I said, they are teasing a return for Kurt Busch to get back behind the wheel. Hopefully these details will be released soon. Hopefully maybe Kurt Busch doesn't come back. Maybe Matt Benedetto gets a chance as well. But at the same token, same time, if he isn't fully returned and he's just teasing us, that would be a massive and major disappointment. Not just for me, but I think for all fans as well. It would be a major and massive disappointment. I hope Kurt Busch not bluffing with us, and I hope he does make a return. We'll see what Kurt Busch does decide to do. And again, it's just been way too long since he's been back behind the wheel. I would love to see him do a road course because the road course would be easier. He wouldn't do a super speedway and probably wouldn't do one of the bigger ovals. A short oval would definitely be something he might end up doing. We'll see what 2311 Racing decides to announce, and we'll see if Kurt Busch is that potential candidate that 2311 Racing is maybe teasing. We'll see what gets announced, and we'll see what happens. I want to see Kurt Busch back, though, man. I miss him racing, and I would love to see him get a chance and opportunity to maybe make a return to NASCAR in the not-so-distant future, and maybe, just maybe, we're going to get the chance and opportunity to see that maybe in 2024. Again, he still has to be medically cleared to get back behind the wheel. Hope he gets medically cleared and gets to do some racing in 2024. We'll have to wait and see what happens. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Stewart-Haas Racing. Now, there's been a lot of talk and chatter surrounding Stewart-Haas Racing over the course of the last couple weeks. The big reason is because of the fact that this is the final year of Stewart-Haas Racing's contract with Ford. We talked about this a few weeks ago. Eric Eastep mentioned this in his video, but at Daytona National Speedway, when it was announced that Front Row Motorsports was going to become a Tier 1 Ford team, they all asked in the media center, was Stewart-Haas Racing going to be a Tier 1 team? And Mark Rushbrook, who is basically the higher-up executive of Ford in Ford Performance, he basically said no comment. There was a report that actually came out from The Athletic over this weekend on Friday asking about SHR that Jordan Bianchi basically says that it's no secret that Stewart-Haas Racing is struggling. We know the front row get a massive technical alliance. And according to Jordan Bianchi, it sounds like the Stewart-Haas Racing could be leaving Ford at the end of 2024, as both sides sounds like are going to part ways at the end of the 2024 season, as this is the final year of Stewart-Haas Racing's contract with Ford. Stewart-Haas Racing has been with Ford since 2017, and they were really good at the beginning. Go back to 2018 when they got all 4 cars into the round of 8. But really since about that point, they've been kind of falling off. Granted, in 2020, Kevin Harvick had a 9-win season, but they've really been on a steep decline over the course of the last couple of years. They lost a lot of their star drivers in recent years. Kevin Harvick retired to join the Fox Sports booth. They lost Eric Almirola, and that Smithfield money and that Busch money has been gone as well. They've lost Kurt Busch in the last 5 or 6 years. They lost Clint Boyer. And the team right now that they have is, while it's a solid team of Chase Briscoe, Noah Gragson, Ryan Preece, and Josh Berry, is not an organization that is going to set the world on fire. And you look at the offseason too, like I mentioned, they lost a lot of sponsorship and they lost a lot of funding. And there's been a lot of talk and chatter over the last couple months that they are going to leave Ford. Now, if Stewart-Haas Racing does effectively leave Ford, where could they go to? Well, there's 2 manufacturers that are out there remaining. The first manufacturer is Chevrolet. Stewart-Haas Racing has a long-term relationship with Chevy from 2009 up until the end of 2016 when they eventually switched to Ford. And they won 2 of their championships during that time. In fact, I think there are only 2 championships they were able to win. You go back to 2011 when Tony Stewart won the championship after a really strong chase, and they won the championship in 2014 with Kevin Harvick. And they had a lot of success during that time as well. There's been people kind of speculating that maybe this is the way the Junior Motorsports buys their way in to buy up Stewart-Haas Racing. I don't think that would be the case. I know Junior Motorsports is interested in jumping up the cup, but as of right now, I don't think that would be the way to move over. But if SHR was to switch over to Chevrolet, I don't know if they would be getting Tier 1 support. They probably would be getting the same support as like Trackhouse, or maybe getting the same support as a team like Richard Childress Racing. They're not going to get low tier support. If Tony Stewart is especially involved, I could definitely see that being a major possibility there of them being a solid organization. But we all know that Hendrick Motorsports is king of Chevrolet, though technically Trackhouse and RCR are Tier 1 organizations too, but they're not absolutely Tier 1. Like Tier 1.5, you probably put Stewart-Haas Racing on that poll. The other thing to think about is Toyota. Toyota, there's been some talks and conversations, and in fact, there was actually a Facebook post that was put up on Facebook. I'm not going to say this official or not, but apparently on a Facebook post, I think a former SHR employee might have had a Toyota sticker, and apparently there might be some conversations going on with Toyota, which I don't know how completely true that is or not, because right now Toyota has 3 teams. You've got Joe Gibbs Racing, you've got 2311, and you've also got Legacy Motor Club. If Stewart-Haas Racing was to switch over to Toyota, man, that would be a massive culture shock for a lot of people, considering Tony Stewart was with Toyota all the way back in 2008. But apparently Tony Stewart was really frustrated, and the big reason he went over to Chevrolet was because he was really frustrated with Toyota and didn't want to be with Toyota in the first place. So I don't think that would be officially confirmed if he would go over to Toyota. And then you think about the other manufacturer that's been heavily linked and rumored in recent years, and that is Honda. We already know there's been a lot of talk and conversations about Honda potentially making a jump into NASCAR. I think Honda is in potential play to go over and work with Stewart-Haas Racing. Just think about it. Honda and Stewart-Haas Racing working together. They could be the first big team they work with. We know the Spire could be a team that switches over as well over to Honda, but Stewart-Haas Racing would be a team to start off. They've been at a lot of success. But you think about SHR. We already know they're trying to make some drastic and they need to make some major key changes if they're going to be successful long term. And right now, I don't think they're going to get that success with Ford, especially with the fact that they don't have the contract signed with Ford past this year. And we know the front row signed a Tier 1 extension with Ford. I don't think that SHR is going to remain with Ford. I think that they are going to split. Again, if I had to look at the manufacturer I think they're most likely going to go to, I think they're going to switch to Chevrolet just because Tony Stewart's had a really big affiliation in the past with Chevy, and I think that they are going to switch over there. But then you got to think about the drivers. If I'm not mistaken, Chase Briscoe is technically under contract with Ford. So this could mean that Chase Briscoe might lose his contract with Ford unless he leaves his contract with Ford. I'd imagine that Chase Briscoe might have to go to a different team if that's the case like the Wood Brothers or something. Though I don't think he wants to do that. I think he'd love to stay with SHR. But everyone thinks about it too. Why would they switch back to Chevy? They've also got two drivers that are technically Chevy drivers as well. You've got Noah Gragson, who's with Chevy for many years, and you've got Josh Berry, who drove for Junior Motorsports for many years in seasons. I think that SHR is going back to Chevy. I know, like I said, there's been some talks with Toyota coming into play. I just don't think they're going to go to Toyota because there's got three really strong and really good teams. I could be entirely wrong, and they do go ahead and switch over to Toyota. But as of right now, I don't think that Stewart-Haas Racing is going to switch to Toyota. I think they're going to switch to Chevy. I don't think they're staying with Ford. I thought there's a chance they're staying with Ford, but the fact we continue to hear more and more about them parting ways with Ford, I think that is going to lead to SHR leaving Ford at the end of this year and at the end of this year, at the season. And then you think about Honda as well. Again, I think Honda is going to come into sport, but Honda is not going to be ready for 2025. Now, is there a possibility that this could be like a gatekeep year where they go in 2025 to Chevrolet perhaps and then switch over to Honda? That definitely could be a shot and possibility, and we know that there will be more charters coming in. And you think about the other thing too. This could lead them to losing some charters. There's a lot of talk conversations that Stewart-Haas Racing could lose a charter at the end of the year if they were to leave Ford. Because right now, under Ford's contract, they have required to have 4 charters, as according to the rules that they had. And I think Tony Stewart's also been frustrated with the fact that he couldn't get certain drivers like Kyle Larson and Kyle Busch and Zane Smith on his team. And I think he sees what Chevrolet's been doing in success. And I think that's why Tony Stewart is going to switch over to Chevrolet in 2025. This definitely is going to be a big story to follow up as time goes on. I'll be watching the SHR story, one of the big silly season stories for sure to watch. We'll see what happens, and we'll see if Stewart-Haas Racing does, in fact, stay with Ford or leave Ford at the end of the season. So, that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support on Patreon as well. Link description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's video. Do you think Stewart-Haas Racing is actually leaving Ford? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And do you think Kurt Busch is actually going to return, or do you think he's just teasing us? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, we're going to have the entry list video for the Shriner Children's 500. We also might have the Xfinity Series race view dropping as well, or some other content dropping. Wednesday, there's going to be another NASCAR news video dropping, maybe the Xfinity Series race picks. And then Thursday will be the NASCAR Cup Series race picks for Phoenix. And we also have potentially a Daniel Suarez video dropping that might drop on this channel. So anyways, we got a lot of great content dropping. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.